Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another interlude episode of RotoBallers' official MMA podcast. Tap that. We just had UFC 290 this past weekend. And folks, by the way, check out RotoBallers premium tools. I'm not going to do the whole read today because we have other alternative football business to get into. And with me today, he is the host of the USFL podcast and the Inside the Walls podcast. He is over there at Pro Football Newsroom. Give it up for Zach Keilman. Zach, thanks so much for being here today. How's it going, man?
Oh, life's good. Life's pretty good. I get a little bit of off-season time now from the USFL, but work's not over like you're talking. I got plenty of National Relay League coverage going on. Playoffs about to start for that. So, the work don't stop, but the fun don't stop either.
And man, the crazy thing about the USFL is, and really with the XFL too, is they were 10-week seasons that I feel like lasted years. And also they felt like they were gone after we blinked an eye after preseason coverage.
They go by like that. That is generally how these go. I cannot say that you are inaccurate. You're probably right on the dot with how I feel about it, because it does spin by. It felt like just maybe yesterday I was in Birmingham for week 1 of that USFL season, and now we already know that the Stallions have gotten 2 straight championships. So it goes by fast, but hey, if you love the game, it generally that is how it goes with something that you enjoy. You never get to savor it enough, it seems.
And with the USFL and XFL, there was just enough time for the league to start off. Things shook out, and we figured we knew who were the cream of the crop was and who the teams that were going to be the worst were, and that had time to fall apart and rebuild back together by the end of both regular seasons.
Yeah, but by both, you talk about it. It seems like this year in spring football was absolutely the year of the sub 500 team. Even if you want to consider that the USFL did have the favorite come out on top eventually, and it was still a struggle. It was for that game, it was a 1-possession game. The XFL, I think everyone in their mother thought that DC, once they got the championship, it was a fun story that Arlington had rallied behind Louise Perez and company, that the Defenders had the more talented squad. They were going to win in a neutral site game. Wasn't the case, and I'll admit that does make it fun. As much as there are some people that I think were not needing to clown on a 4-6 squad getting to 500 through a championship, I think it was an admirable effort. I think it's one of the better storylines of this year in the alternative football scene. The year of the sub 500 team, who would have thought it? But we got it in both leagues, and just happened to be that way. Good games out of those, though. North Division Championship for Crown, that was 2 4-6 teams, came down to overtime. Not on my side, of course, being the resident Panthers fan, but still good games nonetheless. Doesn't always matter about the record. Good football is what matters at the end of the day.
And there were times there at the end, too, where I was like, well, and the Michigan Panthers might be the best team in the North Division. And it was kind of, with the XFL, it was the opposite divisions that, had a bunch of teams that were doing really well, but there were going to be automatic bids in these playoffs. And at the very least, with such precious little time in these regular seasons, you didn't get any weeks where no games mattered.
Right. You always have to be on top. We kind of see this with the 2 USFL seasons and even the XFL old and new from 2020 and 2023. You got to win early. You got to be ahead of the curve, usually right out of the gate. And a lot of it comes down to, did you do well enough in scouting out and drafting / signing high quality offensive line talent and defensive? Those front fives or front 4s and 3s on the defensive side are even more detrimental, or I would think satisfactory to what you want to do in these leagues, because of the fact that once you get past the NFL level, it really does kind of start dipping down, because it's such a specialized position that people seem to overlook, but it does drive so much of your success. You look at championship teams like, for example, Birmingham last 2 years. You look at Arlington, good lines overall. Yeah, Arlington was 4-6, but that was one of their things they did well. They just couldn't get an offense going, but they protect the QB decently. They did a good job up front. Teams like that helps lead the way to championship success.
And I kind of felt bad for Kyle Sloter at the beginning of that Renegade season when the offensive line was playing horribly. And he's not the kind of quarterback that you want bad protection for, because he's so mistake prone than, say, a Luis Perez is.
Well, I think that You have him coming in, and I don't think it's not exactly all on the line there. I do think that did, of course, become a catalyst for some mistakes. I actually have a lot of it being, if you're talking the Renegades in general, they changed their offense. Like as soon as they got Luis Perez in and Kyle Sloter was let go, they changed their offense. It was not a boring 2 runs, 1 pass type of offense like they were doing week in and week out. Because a lot of the time they were leaning on their defense to keep them in games, to keep them ahead of the curve. Eventually, when Perez came in at the end of the season to kind of solidify things, that's when you saw the offense start to take shape, was they started becoming more creative in the pass game. They started mixing up play calls. They decided to start choosing not just to be a run first and hope to God receivers get open on a 3rd down type of offense. I think that would have changed some things. I don't know if it exactly makes Kyle Sloter instantly go from one level to another. Because I mean, Luis Perez, you saw what he did with New Jersey and how keeping him in all season, they were one good contest away from getting to a USFL championship against the Stars last year. But I do think that offense, Jonathan Hayes and Chuck Long, they won't admit it as much, but they definitely changed it once Kyle Sloter left and once Lees came in.
And, that the focus on the offensive line, the defensive pieces in total, and the running back cores of respective teams. Look, I love the USFL and XFL, both of them. If you ask me which one I like to opine and think about more, the answer might even be the XFL. But at the end of the day, I saw something on Twitter that was like, who do you think wins between the Stallions and the Renegades? I'm like, man, I think Birmingham wins that game 31-14. You see a real clear difference, I think, between the 2 leagues right now in the defensive playmakers that make up the rosters.
Yeah, well, I think so. You look at both these leagues. Personally, if I had to compare them from this year's iterations, I think a lot of folks said that it felt like the defensive presence in the USFL was a lot better. A lot better defenders overall across the board, whereas the XFL felt more offense driven and offense heavy. Now, some of the rules benefit that offensive heaviness. I'll be honest with you, if you wanted to compare both those and you said, what if we had a theoretical matchup? My first question would be, okay, I know we're similar rules, but which ones are we keeping? Which ones are we taking? For example, one that I think is huge and one that I prefer because professional tape, are we doing 2 feet in or are we doing 1 foot in? Because there are a lot of times that I saw this past year in the XFL, I'm going, that's a cool catch for the 1 foot rule, but that is tape you throw instantly in the garbage because no scout's going to take that tape, because you have to have 2 feet in if you're being a guy in a professional level that's wanting to go up. In my opinion, credit, that doesn't always stand, but I think that is definitely the skew. Is you had the USFL had I felt like a lot more of the defensive heavy talent in it. And then you had the XFL that had, of course, a lot more, it felt like offensive explosiveness. And that doesn't necessarily say that either opposite side I'm talking wasn't that. Like there are good offensive performers in the USFL. I mean, look at Alex Magoo, for crying out loud. You can't disclose anything about the league without talking about Magoo this past season. You go over to the XFL defensive side, there's great ball players, and some of them are ex-USFL guys, like say Donald Payne, who's over there helping the Renegades lead their way to a championship. So, there were identities, though. I think you're absolutely right. Both of them had their own identities and kind of held to that, but it made their own brand of play.
And it's like the Seattle Sea Dragons, I think, were a really, if you want to get a flavor of what the XFL was like this year, they were a great example. The star power on the offensive side. And, I was one guy who was very skeptical about what Josh Gordon and AJ McCarron were both going to be able to do in that league this year. And, it's guys that you don't see succeed in those positions. And yet they had fantastic years. And there was a mixture of those guys in the XFL. Run backs, I feel like we're way underutilized in the XFL, even though it's not really for the flavor of the league. There were a lot of good backs that I think if they were on USFL rosters, I think they could have had more of a game-to-game impact.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times you did see a lot more emphasis on the pass game and maybe a little more running back by committee at times was kind of the gist, but I didn't see any teams that really wanted to be like a New Jersey Generals of the XFL, where it's just run heavy first. A lot of them wanted to execute more offensive pass heavy offenses, which is fair. The modern game does lean obviously way more into it than ever before, but there are opportunities where if you are getting a stable running game, you can kind of open that pass game up. I thought the Brahmas tried to do that a lot of the season, but it just wasn't as successful. They had pieces, I thought, but it wasn't like they could cohesively get things done in their manner. So Jacques Patrick, I thought was fantastic, or was a good choice, but they never were able to execute and get him enough touches, I thought, to where he could be like he was when he was with the Vipers in 2020. So I do think you're right. I think, like, for example, he could be an excellent choice. Like, if he was in the USFL and was one of those backs, say like the Maulers, how they were very much more run heavy, but they couldn't get as much production, which is still crazy to me because I like Madre London, but he never had the same games that he was in the ELF. I understand different talent level, but he would be great, I think, there. Because then you could do like a 3 running back by committee type of guy. Patrick's is still, he's bulky or bulky like Garrett Groshek, but he has better hands or similar hands, I think, to Madre London. And then you could have 3 unique running backs that way and do it like that. And then you can keep the pass game on the defense on its toes so that Troy Williams doesn't get hit as much during the season like he did. Not a bad take. I think that's a good one, but just comes down to the XFL and what their philosophies were with a lot of coaching.
And the Brahmas were so fun to think about this year because it's like they had like their best 2 offensive talents were absolute bowling balls and Alizé Mack. And it's like, Jack Cohn is kind of the perfect quarterback that in your head you pair with those guys, but it's like you also need to have some sort of scheme that favors those guys' strengths even just a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Cohn, I actually think Cohn has a lot of promise, but I think by the end of the year, kind of started showing more as like a game managerial type, less than what some folks believed at the beginning of the season as this guy's got some stuff where if he gets things down, watch, he's going to explode. And that actually came to be more of the likes of like a Ben DiNucci and AJ McCarron rather than, Cohn. Because I remember, when the Battlehawks came back way earlier in the year, that incredible like 11-point swing he got going on. And we all thought in that game, like, the Brahmas lost, but Jack Cohn, he's going to be special. And turned out to be, it was really McCarron needing to get his feet wet and underneath of him. Jack Cohn was more, I think, of a game managerial type at best. And that would have helped a lot if you were able to get a more consistent run game, or at least be able to lean on that more consistently to where you could have opened that up. They had some receiving talents too. But again, if you can't execute as well, or if you're not able to get to your guys, then things get shut down.
And, you can draw a really close comparison between the DC Defenders and the way that the New Jersey Generals chose to play like a lot of their season, just to tremendously different results, kind of based on the commitment level to it, or, the consistency throughout the year and what you're actually trying to do. But, there's variety in these leagues. That's what I like about it. And, you see that game with the Houston Gamblers earlier in the year where Terry Wilson, a guy who, a lot of it, and I'm a Kentucky football fan, so he's a very familiar name to me. But if you told me that he would have been starting in a professional football game of any likes a few years ago, I would have been shocked. But in these leagues, you just got to go 10 for 15 with 70 yards rushing and a touchdown, and you have done your job for the day.
This sounds about right. I think also that a lot comes down to that both of them have clock rules that you just have to be able to get enough scoring in and hope that your defense is able to hold to burn enough of that clock. Yeah, both of them have like that 5-minute setup where you do slow things down. You give the offense a little bit more chance, the kind of comeback period, as they're kind of referring to it and all. But a lot of it does come down to as long as your defense plays well enough, like say DC's did, which, I mean, give credit. That was one of the reasons that offense was able to kind of buy itself some time and finally kind of catch itself to what worked best, which is more of like a college offense, 1 or 2 read looks, get the ball out of there, kind of have that gadget player and King come in every now and then. You're able to get that. You're able to have a good defense as well that kind of slows things down for you, and you're able to kind of use the time that it gives you back. That can win you some games too. So I think the clock plays a lot into what you're talking about, because like you're never going to see as many stats that look like NFL-esque. Like you're going to see a lot of, like, for quarterbacks, I think a good game for a QB in like both these leagues, and we did see several 300-yard games in both these leagues. No defense, but I think a lot of times if you can get to like 200, 250 passing yards for a QB, like multiple touchdowns and maybe like a 67% completion percentage, that's a pretty good day. That's a generally really good accepted day in, say, either one of these leagues. If you're running for 70, like you're saying, 70 yards on like 15 or so carries. Maybe you get a TD, or maybe you break a long one. That's a pretty good day for a running back. You know, if you're a receiver and you can get like 70, 80 yards on like 4 or 5 receptions, generally you've done a pretty solid job and you're one of the better guys in these leagues.
And, so you're around a lot of different fan experiences that are in relation to the USFL. And this is the free t-shirt that I got for going to the doubleheader in Canton.
Nice.
Before. And it's a nice t-shirt, the USFL fan experience was cool just for the live, and especially at Canton, which is a super cool venue for anybody please check that out. Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. That place is sweet. But what is your take on the comparison of USL fan experiences to the way that the XFL has managed those kinds of things for, their business moving forward in these first few years for each? And obviously it's hard to compare with the XFL being back for 1 year, but what's your take on that? Because that's something you've had a lot of exposure to.
Yeah. So I do want to get to an XFL. First off, I need to get to an XFL game. I was supposed to go to the Battlehawks home opener. I went in 2020 and of course watched the 2023 version on TV and wish I could have been there. I had tickets, had to sell them. Next year, I'm going to probably go to a Vipers game. I live in Arizona now, so I'll just drive up to Las Vegas. But to put this in gear, if you're looking at both of the fan experiences, a lot of it comes down to the business model, like straight up. You have to consider what you are seeing as your challenges. The XFL, that is one advantage that you'll see the common fan talk is, well, hey, if I see all 8 of these teams on the schedule, I know for a fact they're playing at home at some point. I don't have to worry about guessing, is this team in a hub? Is this team far away from me? Is it really locally based? Because we've seen that with the USFL. That has been kind of, I think, one of the common critiques of the league that continues to pop up, much like you're talking. Because, for example, the Canton Hub, if we're talking fan experience, like if you're going as a person that lives out in Northeast Ohio, it's a fun time. It is an affordable, fun time. They make the tickets really easy to get, really a lot of stuff going on. And if you're playing at a hub for, say, you find a weekend where there's 2 teams, you get 2 games. So you get more football. Like, it's better for the overall football fan, and it's good for a family atmosphere. But it's a hub, which has become, since the USFL brought in the hub system, it gets a negative light. Like, it really does. If you bring up a hub to a general football fan, they'll go, ew, you're not at home. You're playing at a neutral site and you're just hoping that you get some people out. That's not, I'm out. Like, people will be out just on the hub sometimes. It's gotten better. I think people have been slowly getting used to it, but since 2022, that connotation you have to use carefully within PR for both these leagues. Because even the XFL uses it, but they use it lightly. They'll say a hub, but they instantly have to go back to, but we play at home. Don't worry, we play in the home stadiums. It's a hub, but it's only in Arlington. So, like, the fan experiences in, like, say, the USFL is great. I think for, like, Memphis, I went to Memphis this year. I went to Detroit this year. I went to Birmingham this year. And Canton. I actually hit all 4. Credit, the Canton ones for the championship. So a little bit different, but still, it's a neutral site. So you have to have people come out for a neutral site game. And I think they do a good job in person. It's just that you have to slowly and eventually, as they say, get to all 8 cities like they want to do. And that'll get over some of that stigma. I can't give you an honest opinion on the in-person XFL experience because I haven't been to one. But everything I've talked to with buddies of mine that have been, they do a solid job promoting it. They do a solid job in person. I've heard no qualms about it. I think both of them do their own thing, especially in-game experience-wise. I just think when we talk about the in-game, the only connotation that comes up is about some teams in the XFL versus all teams in some teams in the USFL versus all teams in the XFL conversation that keeps being brought up. And that'll keep being brought up until we see all 8 USFL teams go into market. And then it all just comes down to what's your favorite, period.
And so on the note about the hubs, I think Tom Benson's great. I think the Liberty Bowl's great. Dude, seeing those games up at Ford it's not a good look. Not the empty seats. Not the empty seats necessarily. It's in playing in a giant empty hangar, and especially when I get that part's not great, but alternate leagues struggle with attendance sometimes. That's not a new thing. But, sometimes the issue is like, the XFL in setting up home environments in the cities where they're playing, it does get a bit of a head start in ingratiating yourselves in each individual city's sports fan culture, as opposed to, New Jersey Generals fans who are they going to Canton, Ohio to watch the home games for their teams? Probably at a very, very low proportion as compared to who you're seeing for XFL games. I see that point, and I see why hubs are also like a means to an end. The goal is never to permanently do hubs. My guess would be it's to get away from that.
Oh, exactly. They're cost-cutting measures. That's the whole thing of this. And I think that's what it does get lost, because here's the deal. Since I've started doing this and like podcasting, you can talk someone's ear off on telling you what the cost benefit of a hub is and how it saves money, like ways it can keep your league alive and give longevity. But this is the thing that goes with football fandom. And I don't knock it, because the gold standard is the NFL. We mostly just follow the NFL. You're getting hardcore guys following these extra leagues right now until they keep staying around longer. We have an expectation, I think people do, for what football needs to look like. And the more you talk about the hub system, people will go, oh yeah, sure. The financials are great, but boy, it looks bad on TV. And that's when I say, and I stop. And this is what gets me, where I'm going, man, there are a lot of people that watch football games to see crowd members that I didn't realize before until a year and a half ago. And now I stop and I do make this argument where I'm like, guys, it's for financials, but I understand you want this to be this way. And that's where I'm like, I kind of give you a very slight, I gotcha. But at the same point, I'm like, money is kind of tight on these leagues. You can't just throw a bunch down a well and hope to God it returns, because that doesn't happen. The history of spring football, look at all the history. It's been similar deals. This is why both these leagues are doing like a hub or a pseudo hub, because it saves them money. Otherwise, if you did the similar traditional format of, we're going to do all offices in cities, we're going to do all this stuff in city right now, and as well as different insurance pieces and different, I would say staff piecings, you're going to be running through cash a lot more than you expect. And that's a big factor in these leagues' survival. If you can stay around longer, generally people will accept you as a normal piece of sports culture and sports landscape. You can't be fly by night. So the best way to do that is to play good football and be sure that you're around like 3, 4, 5 years later, and keep on building with stuff as you go. That's the hardest part of this whole thing.
And that is a battle that these leagues are constantly fighting against, is that the average sports fan doesn't think they're going to be around in a few years. So why learn about them, or, why start to care about it? But, another side of that is, look at the fan environments that you got in DC and St. Louis this year.
Oh yeah.
USFL. I think when you identify the right football starved markets, there is the potential to fill those stadiums with people who are rabidly about that team winning.
Right. Well, I love that you brought those examples up. Obviously, St. Louis, it was a home run in 2020, and it continues to be a home run. And I don't blame them. Like, that's a market that's gotten the short end of the stick in most other sports, in basketball and football, for generations. It has consistently been a city that keeps being told by professional leagues that it doesn't deserve these leagues. It doesn't have the fan base to do these leagues. The NFL left because Stan Kroenke and company wanted to get more money in LA, but they wanted to make an excuse and basically saying, this is my synopsis, not the official thing, but basically them leaving and saying, this market won't support this league. We're going to LA where we're going to get more cash and more friendly offerings. And they took that to heart this last time. They finally said enough's enough. And I think anything that's come in that is at least decent enough football they can rally behind, was like the Battlehawks. They fell in love with it in 2020. They never let go because they wanted their own football branding and their own, to me, like anti-NFL against the machine type of thing, if you ask me. And in 2023, same deal. It came back, instant acceptance with the brand. Boom, we're back in. DC, I think it's a little bit different. It's more that you have an NFL team in market, but by God, I hate the ownership of that team. By God, this team is such a laughing stock on the national stage. I don't want anything with that. I want something that's clean and a fresh start and feels more DC. Which defenders? I mean, it's more, you think like national defenders, like Army type of atmosphere. And you go, all right, this ain't bad. And in 2020, it was I would say it was kind of solid. But I think after you saw 3 years of consistently getting worse commentary from the Washington Commanders, who used to be the Redskins, and all of that muck from behind the scenes. Because it did get worse after 2020. It kept progressively getting horrible on the PR side. People are going, you know what, forget this, I'm out. And so, they're rallying because that team's fun. And the fact that their professional NFL team, if you want to have a second option, it's a true second option. You can get away from some of that kind of disgusting extra pieces to it. Now, credit new ownership, but that's going to take a bit of time. So for the XFL, you got to be happy at least that those two markets, either you have a market that wants to be that anti-NFL, or you have one that wants to exclude itself from some of the NFL type of things right there. And then the rest of it becomes just challenges in establishing itself in market. I think San Antonio is that big bet, like say a St. Louis. The only thing is it didn't hit as well compared to, I would say, the Commanders from the AAF. And I don't know what the whole stats around that are. Maybe it's because they were 3-7 team. Maybe it's just because the marketing wasn't as good. I'm not so 100% sure, but that to me, if I'm looking at the landscape of the league, is the other big market where I'm like, well, if we have to get a third that's up with those other two, so we can keep on building, San Antonio is that next one that I'm going to be targeting the most. But that's the type of markets you're looking for. Ones that, unless you feel good about TV wise, say like a Seattle, a Houston, say a Dallas, Arlington area, you're then looking for the anti-culture, or the ones that haven't been, I would say, included in the national conversation as much, like those three that I just mentioned prior.
And this is what I love about alternative professional sports leagues in general. What I love about the arena football, the National Arena League and the Indoor Football League, is they serve smaller markets, but markets that are still, cities. There's a lot of cities with populations in the six figures around the United States that like professional football. And the last few years, unfortunately, for the National Arena League has seen a lot of teams come and go. And Columbus, for example, where I'm out of, that was a city that had an arena football league for a long time, for years. And now it's not there anymore. It's a smaller league now, but I like when these teams, from the XFL and USFL down to arena football, I like when they serve markets that are kind of outside the normal huge football markets, because I think that's kind of what they're supposed to be.
Right. Well, I think a lot of it, they're trying to get the small community behind something. I think they want that special sauce of, we haven't had our homegrown piece to go around. So let's go to that town and make it something that they can all rally behind. Let's make it truly like you're talking, say, Columbus, Georgia, or Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Georgia? Yes, you're talking
Columbus, Ohio? I thought it was Columbus, Ohio that was at.
Well, Columbus, Georgia is where the Lions are from in the NAL. That's what I'm trying to confirm.
I'm thinking of a few different, because there was also the Louisville Extreme.
Okay, well, I went to those. I definitely went to two of those games. This is where arena indoor gets a little wonky. It's you don't have like big money going behind it, like say, the XFL or USFL. You don't have like titans in like financing or TV going behind it. A lot of it comes down to when you get new franchises, like in the NAL or in the IFL. A lot of it comes to like local owners. They have some money, but they're not like big money usually. Like they do have pockets, but they still need to have at least some financial savvy to where they can make this work, because it's cutthroat. A lot of these teams don't make money. That's the thing. The NAL, for example, it's, not many, I would say, are profitable teams. They're more like side projects that are fun, that, are passion projects per se. IFL, half and half anymore, because they've been getting better at finances, but that's the deal with it. But still, one thing they do great, they support local community is the deal. And if you can rally the communities around enough and you get that local support and you get owners that love their community that much, even profit or not, that's what drives those teams, is if they want to come back and their teams are okay with coming back.
And there's I think it was on the IFL's website, or it was on one of the Arena League's websites, where it's like, bring your arena team to our league, fill out this form. Where's your team located? How much money do you have to invest? This is how it's done. And so folks, we've talked about the USFL and XFL. Check out the USFL podcast that Zach Keilman hosts. But now you're also the host of the Inside the Walls podcast. Folks,
Yes.
check that out too if you want more information at all on the arena football scene. Great show. Love to listen to it. And if you could explain for folks, what do you find to be special about arena football, and what do you think are the key differences between the NAL and the IFL?
So what I love about arena football is that, and this is where I'll explain a little bit more of the comparisons between the two, because this is why I favor one over the other. Arena football, it's pass heavy. It has players that play two ways on most downs, except for a special few, and the nets, which sound crazy because when we think of nets, we think of field goal nets that hold the ball back. These things make the game nuts in terms of kickoffs, in terms of passes. I love those aspects. And I also love that it does bring out, much like the USFL and the XFL, that, I'm getting my second chance, or I get my chance to extend my playing career. That's all that. Plus I love the high scoring. I mean, last night, for example, as we recorded this, by the way, we had two NAL games. Both teams hit 66 plus points as the winners. So that's a normal thing. We see like 50, 60 point winner type of games as a normal basis in either one of these leagues, by the way. So I love the high scoring. I love that you have to sit there and you have to be attentive in your seat to watch every one of these scores. Defense, as much as it doesn't seem like it's as important, it is huge because turnovers are that much more valuable. If you see a turnover in arena or indoor, it's a big deal, even more so than outdoor, because outdoor, you have more spacing to where you can slow down the game. You have more chances to where you can kind of, I think, manipulate what plays you're calling or what defenses you're calling. Indoor and arena, there's less players and there's less structure in terms of, I would say, play calling and in terms of defensive scheme, to where it really comes down a lot more to the man-on-man situations or the skill sets of the players that are in the secondary or are on the front lines that come out at its best moments. So it's a very special, unique game. It's different from the outdoor game. That's why I watch it. It's because, if you want an true alternative, like you're not just looking for like spring football, you're like, okay, I love the NFL, but what other football's out there? And you don't want to watch the same old in your eyes, or close to the same old. The arena football is truly a different game. It is, you tune in and watch and you go, wow, this is way out there. And then you sit there and you watch people get hit over the wall, or you watch people catch a ball over the wall, or you watch a ball hit the bar of the net and it bounces on a kickoff and everyone's scrambling like a fire drill to get the damn thing, because that can mean a turnover in possession. That's why I love it. Differences though, and this is why I lean NAL, by the way, in terms of play. I'm not saying it's the better overall league. I think that the IFL has done a great job giving its marketing a boost. I think it's done a great job in getting teams, just kind of stabilized and more out there for people. I mean, the XFL is partnering with it. So clearly, you can tell there's movement in the right direction, that they've chosen to pick that side. But to me, why I picked the NAL, it's because indoor and arena, as much as they're similar, they actually are different. For example, they play differently. If you're watching the IFL, you'll notice there's a lot more outdoor concepts in the IFL. You see a lot of RPOs. You see a lot more running in that league. You're seeing more, I would say, you're seeing a lot more, I think, open defense in the IFL, which is more to mimic the outdoor game, where you have a lot more blitzers on the outside. You have a lot more people that can more openly maneuver on the field. And you got more motion. You have two motion players. That's not as big of a deal. It's just another difference type of thing. But the play calling in general is what I'm not as much of a guy, because I'm that guy, like I talked at the beginning. I want like completely different. So if I'm watching the IFL and I'm going, this feels kind of close to the outdoor game. Like you're running a lot of runs and all that, and it can be exciting. I more want the deep ball passes. I want more of the crazy catches. I want more of the net catches. I want more of the nets dropping off and bouncing balls into the field. That's what's the difference to me. They are a bit different, and the IFL doesn't use nets. No offense to them. It is cheaper, by the way. It helps with cost. But it does change the game, because if you're doing a kickoff, for example, you have two options. You either squib kick it onto the turf, and hey, that can be random, but it doesn't look as cool. Or you kick it out of bounds, which just results in a touchback. Okay, whatever. In arena, you're almost guaranteed a return. Like you can crash that thing downfield with all your might, but odds are it's either hitting the net or it's inbounds. There's no in between. And even if you kick it out of bounds, 1 point is rewarded to a team that kicks it out of bounds. They penalize you for kicking it out of bounds on the side because they want that return so badly. So a lot of to me and to others, probably a lot of like minute differences, but to me, they're key as to why I like, or when you tell me arena, I like the arena term better than when I hear someone say indoor. It's just a preference thing, but that's exactly why I cover arena over indoor.
Okay, I gotcha. And I think it was a game between the Sharks and the Cobras early in the year where you see like 4 straight kickoff returns for touchdowns back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
And it's like special teams, that's an area that you're seeing almost systematically eliminated from the more the more higher ranking levels of professional football. And it might be the most relevant, portion from game to game for certain arena or indoor games.
It can be. IFL has a lot of great special teams. Like if you get a squib that goes right, you can see guys that are great returners in that league too. There's no doubt about it. In the NAL though, like you're talking repeat returns like that are a common thing. And there's some great returnmen in this league, for crying out loud. I mean, Khalil Rashad over in San Antonio, Kendrick Ings, who recently got signed on to the San Antonio Gunslingers. He's going to be playing next week. He's one of the best returnmen in this league and one of the best returnmen I've seen in arena since he's been around in the AFL days. Darius Prince, who besides the return man is an incredible receiving talent, one of the best in the NAL has seen, if not the best they've seen in its history. But that's the simple thing is you get special teams being more impacted that way. And not just kickoffs too. I didn't even mention this in terms of differences. Now credit the IFL uses this, but in a different way is you have the deuce rule in the NAL where on kickoffs, you can get 2 points rewarded to you. If you kick it all the way downfield, it goes through the uprights. So you can have on a play, say you needed that 2-point conversion on a touchdown, you can have a 10-point swing in one possession and really can change the game for you if you're good. 9 points alone, if you just have a good enough kicker that can accurately smack it down the field. And there are some damn good kickers in the NAL. I mean, we talk TC Stevens, who's been a staple in this league. Mark Didio Weber, who has been arguably the best kicker in the NAL. He's on the West Texas Warbirds, who though aren't doing so hot on the record sheet. He's looking like he's the special teams player of the year right now. Has the most deuces in the league. He's been kicking field goals, which this is another big difference. NAL, you'll see field goals rarely because teams like to go for the scores. IFL, teams will take the field goals as a more strategic point. It's okay, but I'm a touchdown guy. But if you can kick field goals consistently, like, for example, say Weber, who can kick a 40-yarder in arena, which, remember, the goalposts, they're shrunken. So you have to be damn accurate to kick a football in these leagues. He's a good kicker. Like, that's a guy that next year I hope in one of these outdoor leagues of XFL, USFL, or even, NFL, I'm hoping somewhere he goes outdoors and goes and rocks him because he really should be an outdoor league for how accurate he is. But, if you're good at special teams here, you can go anywhere. I do think in the NAL, though, with the Nets, that's what's so crucial about them is they make the special teams that much more important. Bar balls, like I hinted at, which for those that don't know, bar ball is if a ball gets kicked off, it hits a bar on the outside of the net in any capacity or on the crossbar and bounces back into play, and you don't get someone that returns it or it takes a wacky jump, that's a bar ball. That means that usually chaos happens. Either you have a recovery that's very frantic, or you have a quick touchdown that can happen, or you can have a quick recovery that can swing a game. And those, you just don't see that in the IFL or CIF game. It's not there because the nets are smaller. The NAL, it's the huge piece of equipment. So you hit that bar, I mean, that's an unpredictable factor, but it can change a game on a dime. So I think you're absolutely right. Special teams, it does take a more precedent because it does help with scoring and it does make quicker scores in these leagues with a shortened field.
And this is what I love about both leagues. And both leagues, you can go to their YouTube page and watch several games live per week
for free.
And if you're let's say you're a Cincinnati Reds fan there, Zach, and you had problems finding a way to watch games all year long because Bally Sports is an evil, evil company.
Oh my God.
That you get to watch these games for free. It's there. Local businesses in Tucson, Arizona. I now know where to go get wings because it's right there on a banner on the field live on YouTube. And you look at the fans that are there for those games, they're having a blast. They've got the fan experience for those leagues down pretty well. And it's kids, it's some people, who are out for a drunken evening on the weekend. That's all great. That makes for great professional football viewing, Zach. And the IFL, they got the wacky colored turfs. That's They got the different cities that are represented, like Sioux Falls and Tucson and Tulsa, Massachusetts. That's a team I love to watch in the IFL. The NAL, these differences in the style of play, the passing heavy offenses and the differences with kicking, it makes you more attractive, both to the guys that are longtime veterans of the professional football circuit, guys like Arvil Nelson, who continues over a 10-year career in professional football to pass for big numbers this year for the San Antonio Gunslingers. And then you got kickers that are more able to show off their talents for professional scouts, like Shane McInerney for the Orlando Guardians earlier in the year. I give that as an example because he was previously a guest on the show.
Sure.
There's a ton of those examples. But so how do you think that these two leagues are kind of trying to position themselves as far as the kind of talent that they're looking to build their identities around? Because we see that the IFL just did their XFL showcase. So it's like the XFL is doing showcases all over the place, kind of trying to establish themselves as what, like the G League Ignite or the Overtime Elite, sort of, if you can. And now it's like the arena teams, and you see the ELF too has risen in prominence because of this reason. Is what talent are we going to have? Are we like the USFL where we're just trying to put a competent product on the field, or do we want this to be a jumping off point for talent?
I love this question because it does highlight both of their mission statements they want, and at least what they're looking to do. So the IFL, one of its cores, we're taking back to the IFL's origins 15 years ago. So they split off from the AFL at the time and basically wanted to be saying, we're going to make our own football brand. We're going to be running it the way we feel is best, and that we can control cost and make a style that's different than the AFL at that time, which it is a little bit different. But one thing it does, and this is where I think the IFL's mission is clear now in terms of, you see the XFL partnership here. When I talk about like the outdoor concepts that they run, in this game, it does translate to where you can see teams in the XFL and company go, all right, yeah, we see where this fits on an outdoor basis. We see where this fits in our outdoor schemes, like a running back or like a receiver that is used to some of these outdoor concepts like that. We see where this fits. We can look at that and more, I think, put more attention to how we can translate this game to the outdoor game from that tape. And I think that's what they're trying to do with this partnership. Not to mention it's, you put the XFL slapped on your website, you look more legitimate, and it helps with keeping your players based on what they're trying to do with the partnership, to try and keep them somewhat in their ecosystem, even though the indoor and arena ecosystem with contracts is basically you get an outdoor contract, you leave. There's really not much struggle to that. You can go wherever, really. But anyway, their mission is clear, that it's more like, hey, we got these players that are playing these outdoor specialized positions. We don't have Iron Man. You play one side, and that's the only side you play. That's all we're hiring you for, so that way you translate the outdoor where there's no Iron Man, there's no two-way players anymore. So they're like, oh yeah, you specialize in offensive line? Yeah, come on out. We can trust you with that. You specialize at running back and you've been doing decently well in terms of like some of your play calls or getting these RPO or these, kind of like maybe pistol formation or like shotgun formation type of runs. Yeah, come on out. We like what you're doing out there. And that's just on 50 yards. Imagine we give you more space. So I think that's what they're trying to do, is leverage it like that, where we look like the outdoor game kind of. Maybe these players, they can get a look at that, and then it helps outdoor leagues look at them more, so they get maybe more resources and more people give them street cred, is how I view it. The NAL, I'll admit, That's one thing. Besides the fact that they are in a completely different position, they are more about right now, given the year it's been, they want to stabilize so bad. That is a huge thing. It's about stability next year. They badly just want to be like, look, we got a game. Let's show the people we are a competent, normal running league, and we can just get good, positive vibes moving our way. No closed teams in the middle of the season, no ABs anymore, because it is a good league. Honestly, the Antonio Brown thing did the worst possible thing you could imagine for that league, which is in terms of, oh God, that's the AB league now. And so they need to get rid of that. But their whole deal is, and just talking with the commissioner and talking with folks in that league, they want to bring back the arena player. Like if you look back at when the arena started in the late 80s and how it went through in the 90s up until like the mid 2000s, the arena player is the Ironman guy. We're talking the two-way all-around athlete, good physical fitness, can kind of be put into position, a can-all, do-all guy that, he can catch a pass when needed. He can be that blocker when needed, And I almost view that as like, say, the type of player that wants to just play and he'll take any position he can to play at the next level. In arena, though, that, like I said, it's in arena, that term comes to the arena guy. Unless you're a quarterback, a lot of them, they want the strong arm QB. They want the guy that has a quick trigger for a pass. The IFL has that too, but the NAL especially, they want that. They want a guy that has a good, accurate, deep ball arm. They want receivers that, if you're specializing in one of those receiver positions, that they can catch like any of the others. But their key guy is the Ironman guy. Their key guy is a good physical guy that can play multiple positions and can play it well and basically be the, yes, coach, I can do this two ways type of person. So different mission statements, at least how I view them, but both of them have their way up. I think we've seen some NAL guys this year that have gone to that next level from this, like DJ Myers, last year's Ironman of the year. He did have his stints with the Showboats. Now, credit, we'll see where he goes from there, but at least I was glad that he got his look. And that's a guy that had been playing receiver in 2021 before they switched to Ironman rules. And then he excels at the linebacking position and also as a receiver with the Carolina Cobras. So that is kind of the difference. You're looking at more the athletic requirements and what you're asking of players changes depending on which league you are in, specifically between those two.
And it's crazy. I mean, I see why this is not something they want, but at the same time, it's almost like football can be the last to kind of develop on this side in terms of like, from a Moneyball's perspective, you love the idea of a guy that can step in and do anything at a moment's notice.
Right.
I love guys who have fullback as their second position, no matter what level of football is. We're talking, I love guys with that position description. And oh damn, what was the next thing I was going to bring up? We keep talking using the term outdoor football.
There you go.
But it's interesting, right? Because so much of, even from the college game upward, so much more of the highest level of professional football, which you can kind of call college football now, is played indoors. It's almost like we should call arena and indoor football 50-yard football as opposed to 100-yard football.
Yeah. I mean, it's the 50-yard game. That's how they both kind of market themselves as. So you aren't wrong. I mean, yeah, a lot of it's just a lot more speed. And I'll be honest with you, arena, or both of these sports, honestly, the 50-yard game. I won't even mention the skews. Let's just talk the 50-yard game in general, like the basic mechanics and all that jazz. It's not in the same spot it was in, say, like in 2007, where you're at the height of like the AFL. People look at it as like maybe it is the next big sport in America. Because there was a point where the AFL almost was pretty much almost competing with the MLS to be that next big sport. It was at that point. Once Kurt Warner hit off, it was close. Like it did come to that zenith. We had NFL teams buying in. There was a time.
There's an arena video game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There was a time where this was a national phenomenon. But after we saw the collapses, people just kind of forgot about it. And it's never left. It's just that it's never hit the, I think, cultural zeitgeist that it once had. Now, the IFL's gotten better. I'll be honest with you. That's, again, I can't stress enough. I might be an NAL guy, but I will never not give credit to the IFL for how they've been marketing themselves in recent years, because you got people now coming up where it feels like if we're talking and you ask some Joe Schmo on the street that maybe is a football fan, what's your preferred league? They'll go to the IFL and they'll be like, well, it looks the most professional. It's got the most teams, that's good marketing. They've done a lot of good marketing for themselves in recent years, and they do a great job, I think, managing PR and keeping things close knit to where, it does look in terms of out of the landscape, the most respectable of all the organizations. So, and that does attract talents too. I think not everyone looks at that exactly, but like, say you're a specialist guy and you don't like the Iron Man side of this. Yeah, I'm going to go to the IFL. I got my specialty play. I'm a receiver, man. I ain't no DB. I'm going to go play receiver. I ain't no defensive lineman. I am a tackle. I'm going to go play tackle. That's the type of stuff I look at too.
And here's another interesting thing, especially about the NAL. If you go to their website, folks, the National Arena League, and click on a little tab called Transactions, you'll see daily chaos popping off with names of dudes that played at the highest level of Division I football and guys that played at Corpus Christi Community College. And I love that. I love being able to see guys of all different collegiate levels and paths to this point. But you'll also see guys like, Rakeem Cato getting cut by the Fayetteville Mustangs?
Yep.
So explain to folks if you can. I mean, I know you can, if you will. Explain to folks exactly why there's so many transactions in these leagues and what kind of ends they're trying to serve.
I will do my best. I'm messing around. No, so one thing, if you are following any of these leagues, especially NAL, because you have less teams and it seems more chaotic for some reason, transactions list is like its own special little page. You almost want to tune in every week to see that. And I mean, it just, of course it serves to keep up with the team, but like really, if we're talking in terms of like this year, in terms of like every NAL season and even IFL, but more so the NAL, I'll be frank, NAL seasons towards the end, like towards the playoffs, they get kind of nuts with the transactions because teams don't exactly have much of a cutoff. Like it's a very late cutoff to sign people. So you can see guys that they'll take swings on that maybe haven't played in a year or two that are big money guys that they'll go, all right, come on in. Let's have you for a few games. Like one of them is like AFL legend Joe Hills a few years ago. Like he went to the Predators. Predators were 5-5 at that time. And they said, you know what? We need a big body receiver. He hasn't played in a few years. Joe, come on in and play. We need you, man. And so you'll see these signings come in and you're like, whoa, what in the world? I thought we were stuck to these rosters, and no, it's nonstop. We had last year, Tommy Grady, the Carolina Cobras, they have their star Jonathan Bain go down. And so they're looking to get a big QB in there to kind of solidify things until Jonathan can come back. Here's Tommy Grady, who hasn't played in about a year, and he's sitting out. He last played with Albany in 2021. And they go, Tommy, let's sign you on. And everyone loses their mind because Tommy is this like super accoladed quarterback from the AFL days, won multiple championships, both AFL and NAL, comes in. And the signing is incredible in terms of on paper, but then in terms of paper and just like reacting, but then you look at the field, he's out by one game. But this is the NAL, like crazy signings, last minute stuff. A lot of this year comes down because you have two teams that go under. So how do you distribute all this talent? It's got to go somewhere. Like, for example, like I'm looking at the transactions page right now. You're mentioning like Kendrick Ings. Ings was on the Fayetteville Mustangs until a few weeks ago when the Mustangs went under because of financial issues. So Ings is going to an 8-2 San Antonio Gunslinger squad, who's already loaded, by the way. Phil Barnett, Khalil Rashad, both are some of the better receivers in this league. So he's going to go there. He's a great returner. Rashad is too. So you have two of the best return men in the league on the same team. And Rashad and Ings has played defense in the past, so he can play DB if he wants to. Like, this is the type of stuff we run into. Like, it's sad when a team goes under, but for the transactions page guy like myself as well, and it's less important in the grand scheme because I'd rather have these guys be on a team and not have to worry about financial ruin. But in the hindsight, you look at this though and go, wow, this is nuts. Like, Ings is over here. Walter Thomas, who's an excellent defensive tackle, he's over in West Texas, but West Texas is 2-9. You'll see guys that are starters that'll drop off because they're like, you're way better. We need this all-star list of characters to jump on. Like Trey Long, another guy who was on the Fayetteville Mustangs, goes to the Preds, who already have on paper one of the most all-star studded casts on both sides of the field. He's added on this week, and I'm going, where does he fit in? It's more about just like a grab bag, catch them all, like the Pokemon philosophy or something like that.
And that there's a few interesting points in there. One, the Albany Empire. That was
man.
That poor city, and that it had such a good feeling around it. Obviously, internally things weren't, fantastic, but like there was potential there, and they were ingratiated into the community pretty strongly. It seemed like they had Vinny Testaverde's son playing quarterback for them for a time. They won championships. That was a team that originally caught my attention and started getting me to watch the NAL product. Is like, damn, like Albany has something good going. That's what you want to have if you're a league, is recognizable, organizations that are doing high quality things. And as is always going to be an issue for leagues like this, and it is an issue increasingly so in every professional sports organization, and it'll probably be that way for every year moving forward. What is the level of happiness for these players and all the staff and personnel that are involved in these leagues? What is the, how do you feel that, internally the zeitgeist is kind of marinating?
I'll tell you, just to keep saying it, because it is true. I mean, I've been told this in the past from owners. You kind of have to be passionate and a little crazy to own an arena team or an indoor team, because of just the startup for that. And Albany, I think, was no exception. You had a guy in Mike Quarta that, community guy, runs Techie's Fire Water Restoration, is a big company in that capital region, taking it under the wings and kind of running with it. Thing is, though, when I say crazy, you also have to have costs in mind with that crazy. And so, the whole AB situation like that, it drives me nuts, because there were legitimate reasons for what needed to be done in terms of ownership. It's just, I wonder what could have been in terms of, was there anyone else on the table? Because that's the whole thing. Like, if you want to be based in the community, if there are community owners that were interested, and this goes for any league, by the way, if you have community people interested and you keep building that community support and community ownership, then it makes it a lot easier for you to, be like, hey, this is a community driven product. I feel like I'm more ingrained with the folks I'm living in the city or in this area with. I can support this, even if I lose a little bit of money. So, like, this instance came down to the fact you have an owner that is about to try and pay, and this report I've been checking into and double checked is $1.5 million in New York State workers' comp fees, which is one of the most expensive workers' comps from my understanding in the country. It is a huge expense for any team, but is especially expensive in the Northeast. And Tech East is a big company, but they're not that big. So apparently you get someone that, in credit, talking the community angle, AB he has background in the capital region. He grew up in Albany, New York. He watched his dad play for the Firebirds back in the 90s, one of the greatest receivers in the AFL's history to ever do the game and ever play the game. So there's some credence to it. He does know the area. So, like, I do agree with folks that come in and you're a local guy that wants to invest. Yeah, I think you should. Orlando, for example, they have John Chaney, who is an Orlando guy that invests in. He's been an excellent member to the NAL, like continually helps grow the Predators as a franchise. It's fantastic. Over in Albany, though, I think it's a little bit different. You got a guy that jumps in, and by the end of the day, when all this mess happens, when you have the team having this fight on a bus, when you have players getting let go constantly every week, you have an owner that is claiming he's wanting to play but doesn't play under certain circumstances, leaves these awkward press conferences with weird quotes and grabbing the mics. At the end of the day, I think a lot of us ask and say, was it really about the community? And that's where I think a lot of this comes down to. If you're doing arena or indoor, there is a grand scheme that I think a lot of fans like myself do say, hey, let's grow the sport big time. But it comes down to, you need to be in the community more. And you need to be able to, as you say, kind of marinate that. And I don't think, in terms of that example in Albany, once Mike Quarta's out of the picture and it's the AB show, he says it's the community. I don't ever feel like, and no one ever feels like it really was about the community after that point, which is a damn shame because Albany, New York is an excellent community, I think, for minor league and for smaller time sports like this. And as you can see, if you've been following along, the CEO of the MVP Arena, Bob Belber, has already been on the case to try and find a new team because that community likes its arena football. It wants a team back because it was helping support a lot of local businesses. You know, you make it about the community, you make it about being in your market and what you love about your city, and owners can go far, you know. And I think, and Mike Quarta showed that thing was they just, some things they couldn't get done. They couldn't get the money to work. And again, New York workers' comp is a lot. You know, it's hard to do sports in the Northeast. So eventually that's what fortunately led to this. And some steps were made incorrectly along the way, from what I understand, in terms of getting AB as this ownership portion. But it's a perfect example of saying, hey, make it a true community guy first when you do this and help develop that. You know, make it the businessman that's there. Make it the folks that are there every week that know who your locals are, you know, because without that, I think it's useless. Like you're better off doing that. We saw that in the AFL's like Celebrity Day era, where you saw like John Elway and like Jerry Jones buying into teams, because it's great and all, but like if they're not on the ground and trying to build that, that's not what makes arena football work. You know, like it hasn't been able to do big time because the finances haven't been able to work that way. The only way you can is if you get people who live and know their city buying in. And that's and this year's 2022 Albany Empire are the perfect example of what happens when you put someone in there that doesn't truly know what their city's all about or has lost touch with that staple of what it's all about.
And to your point, these are different situations that college teams, now that there's NIL all the way up the professional rungs, experience is, you know, the XFL, the USFL, because of different ownership situations, they can kind of take a more long-term approach, or, you know, they can kind of avoid short-term cash outs to ultimately try to achieve what a longer-term vision is. But in an arena setting, you can't really control what some of these guys are going to do with their time and their money. When, like you said, it takes passion and it takes being crazy, and it's hard to get a perfect proportion of those two qualities all the time. And so what you get are people who are not willing to invest in the community first to ultimately get that long-term payout.
Exactly. That is exactly the point. There's a lot more, I think, liquidity in terms of how you can move on from these things in arena. You know, I think one thing that folks know about arena football, if you look at its history, I mean, a lot of fly-by-night organizations, a lot of one and dones, a lot of few years and out type of things. And that's just because, you know, it is that crazy nature of it. You know, you can, like, there is the cool factor of I buy into a team and I own a professional football team, you know, which I do think there are, I do label like some of these leagues. I think that they are true athletes. So I label them as professional. I know it's minor league level of production and minor league level of like kind of appeal with some of these. You have theme nights and all that, like that goes on with arena. But I label these as professional athletes because they are trying to get to that next level. So I put them that way. So you can say like, I own a professional football team. And I'm like, that's great. But the thing is, that's after once you get to that point and you can say that, it starts going and wearing off when you go, oh, wait, I have to pay how much for a roster? Oh yeah, I got workers' comp and insurance to drop. Wait, how much does the arena take out of my cut for tickets again? And parking? Yeah, then costs, that's when you have to worry about it. And then the other factor going, wait a minute, you have to tell me I have to even do more on the ground hard work to get sponsors because that's my bread and butter on financing a season. Because if you notice on those big dasher boards on the sidewalls, like the big padded walls when you're on the 50-yard game, you got to have sponsors. You know, anytime I've talked about arena with folks or indoor folks, that is really the life force of so many of these teams to finance is I got to sell ads. I have to be in the community and getting people to buy in on using their money to spend it on a dasher board ad or on a TV or on like a in arena ad or something like that. And then, so once you're past that honeymoon period of like, I own this, I invested, you know, I'm an expansion guy. I'm in the owner's circle. Good luck, because at that point, that's when you have to play serious. Like you learn if you're sinking or swimming sooner rather than later after that. And I think, you know, I think not to go too far into it, but for the opposite example of what we saw with like, whereas AB was more we saw about just like the street cred, but he had the money. Fayetteville was more of the, I get the street cred. I'm not so sure I have the money. And I think that was more of a situation we saw where really this is where I ask, do you have the finances to do this? Because it hurts the game overall. Like it continues a bad, I think, precedent in arena and indoor where fly by night. Because the casual fan will see this league and go, some of these teams will just be gone in a year or two. And I'm like, that's the stigma you got to get rid of, and you got to get over that with finding guys that have that crazy urge to play, but have the capital and can prove to you that they are in this for the long haul. It's not some like, I got this little badge I can wear forever that even if this team goes under in a year or less than a year, I can at least say I was a professional owner. You don't want those people. You want people that they're like, you know what? This will be a tough grind, but I got the financials to do it. And I'm with you. I love this game that much. Let's just make this work. Like that's the type of person you want. So a lot of examples of that. This last year, I think is perfect. Like for the NAL and the sake of the two teams that have gone, the perfect dichotomy of I think the sides you see either doesn't have enough money, but wants it and gets that cred, or has the money, but doesn't understand what he's doing or why the local side of this matters more in terms of that. And it's too much about ego at that point.
And you hate to see, a situation like Fayetteville. You hate to see it not being able to work just because of something as simple as capital.
I know.
Even though obviously that happens, like we can't be fans of alternative professional sports without being realistic and understanding what it is that keeps the lights on for these teams that we love. But at the same time, it's just, you hate to see a city that loves to watch a football team and guys that are getting professional opportunities not being able to get that because of the economic side, as opposed to being in touch with the community and making the right decisions.
Yeah. In the back of my head, for any one of these leagues I watch that's not NFL, I know that thought back there is sitting there going, this can go down at any time, right? Like this could go under, and it's there. Like you have to be realistic when you're doing any coverage or watching this, because this is not stable. The NFL had to go through its growing pains, and it was at one point like this. Now, credit, landscape of sports has changed entirely. This ain't the 1920s or 30s anymore. But, that does sit there. When you're watching this, you're like, hey, have fun with it, because that could happen, any given time. And so, yeah, I mean, you just gotta roll with the punches at that point. I mean, the USFL, it's the same deal where it's like, I have people that are like, if they don't get into stadiums, this could just go under. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I'm not blind. Like I know that this could go. I've seen it. Like there's history. There's books on this stuff. There's people that have told you about collapses. You don't got to tell me that. What are you trying to make me feel mad for? So like, I mean, I tell this to everyone here, and you'll get the same deal. Like, for example, if the NAL or the USFL went under, I'd be done podcasting about either of them, because I've gone through my ringer. I know what I've seen at this point. So, if anything, I can be like this old man in a chair telling you, oh, let me tell you about the rocking back and forth. Let me tell you about the history of the National Arena League, or let me tell you about the history of the USFL or spring football.
People don't know the history of professional sports. They're not aware that there have been so many of these things going back decades and decades. You go back to when the NBA wasn't the biggest professional basketball league. And that's for a comparatively new professional sport and professional basketball. And you look at, it's so hard. There's skeptics now. Everybody has an opinion about the direction moving forward, but at the end of the day, man, there's college quarterbacks that have never played a snap that are millionaires because of the stars that they had going into the game. And
wild, man.
And we're looking back in sports history, like look at the ABA and the whole thing that they went through to get a few teams, and ended up changing all of professional basketball and the way basketball is played around the world as a result. And you look at spring or alternative football leagues, it's like the Michael Scott Paper Company. If you shut me down today, there'll be the AAF tomorrow and the spring league the next day. I have no shortage of names. So, ultimately, are we fans of the XFL, the USFL of these leagues? We're fans of the spirit and of the flavor of what these things represent. And I think that there's always going to be something to come along that feeds or that that feeds that hunger that is there. It's just about, can we get someone competent to be in charge of this for, enough time to get this cemented into the ground?
Exactly. So something that you might know, and I definitely have seen, is that the thing is, I call this that we're in the golden age of alternative football right now. We have two major under NFL leagues playing in the spring or summertime. Along with, you can watch Canadian football. You can watch indoor and arena for free. And there's even more leagues coming. We have the IFA coming up, which is international in Mexico and Texas and like the South, being run by like Cal Mummy. And, there's a ton of football right now. We have so much. Yeah. I mean, if you're a diehard fan of this sport, you have so much you can watch, but that doesn't mean it's stable. Like that's the thing. I think a lot of people sit there, and they want, it's the passion to have another option. Or if they are that hardcore about their favorite sport, they don't have to sit around and wait, and go through off-season items. They can go watch football right now. That's the beauty of it. Like I still come out of the NFL. I still do on the side, but I got football playing right now with guys that are college guys that I remember from different various places. Not everyone is an all-star Bryce Young that's going to be hit off and sent away. There's a lot of college dudes that were supporting role characters, or people that maybe didn't get as much of a spotlight, that are going off to these leagues and getting their second chance to play. And you go, oh, I remember this guy. He was pretty good. He just didn't get the NFL level, but I'm glad he's playing again. That's the type of beauty of it, And so I think you have that as an aspect where people are rooting behind that. People, as much as they bicker about which of these two leagues is better, which is a big debate online, XFL, USFL, here's the grand goal. I'm not going to get into that debate because I don't want to, because it's ugly. It is ugly. I'll be honest with you.
Unfortunately, ugly.
It is. I don't like talking about it. I've excluded myself doing it because at this point, we have two leagues on with it. I think Bill Shea said it best in a tweet I saw with somebody complaining about like numbers about the USFL championship game, which credit, they were down. But here's the deal. He said it best. He said, you know what? We have two outdoor leagues right now playing good, competent football. Enjoy the ride. Let the businesses decide on how this goes, And I think that's all people want, is even with this arguing back and forth, at the end of the day, they just want one of these brands to work. It doesn't really matter. They want one of these two main outdoor ones. They just want that to stick, because then they can say, I don't have to worry about this after the NFL. I can always have this to lean on if I want. And it's the best chance to do it because there's more money flowing in this sport right now, and the more opportunities for it to go right now. Indoor, I think you're always going to see it around. I call it I call that section, this will sound ugly, but I call it the cockroach of football, because it never dies. You're always going to have that passion. Ever since Jim Foster built it, I think people are fascinated by the low entry point / uniqueness of that sport. And now you have 2 to 3 leagues that are consistently playing, so it'll never die. It just needs to be more, I think, honestly run, and less about like the scummy back behind the scenes stuff or the fly by night nature of it. But that's the thing. It's about the passion of the sport. People just love the sport, period. So like, even if we are bickering online about the two sides of the outdoor game, at the end of the day, you get football. Like, that's all that matters to me. I've less and less started caring about ratings, because both of them are getting similar ratings. Both of them are doing things that each of them loves. It's football. I get to watch football in the spring and summertime. I don't have to sit here and be bored after the draft. I got something going on that actually is playing good stuff on TV that I can go, wow, look at that highlight. Wow, look at these guys. Wow, maybe this is the next guy that's a potential up-and-coming star. Everyone wants the next Kurt Warner, I think. They all look at Kurt Warner from the AFL and they're going, man, I hope we can get that type of player someday that goes from like grocery boy to Super Bowl title winner. That story can play anywhere. And I think that's part of the magic. Who's the diamond in the rough? Who's the forgotten soul that gets their chance to get redemption? And that's all these people want. That and a second chance to watch football, so they don't have to wait a whole half+ year to then get another NFL season.
Absolutely. And these leagues, for all sports, it serves as our version of a fast forward button for the evolution from top to bottom of these sports.
Yes.
We have routinely seen the NBA, the NFL steal things from alternative leagues that have been working. And what works in an alternative league is a direct look in the mirror for what's not working for your league and for what you're doing wrong. And, we see, whenever there's a successful alternative professional football team come around, we all focus on what we don't like about the NFL as a result. And, you look, it's why things like independent baseball and minor league baseball is so important, because when you go and you buy a ticket for you and someone else for $40 a piece, and you pay $50 combined for 4 beers throughout the time there, you can't help but feel that your team and the sport that you love has been taken from you, and given to, corporate box seat plans. And so, being able to go for $10 a pop to a doubleheader in Canton, Ohio is extremely refreshing.
Yeah, that affordability, again, can't stress that enough. For at least that league, you get that. I think your point on kind of driving forward the sport and more putting that fast forward button on, like, I think development and kind of getting things that we feel are necessary is huge as well. I mean, think about 2020's XFL, how many revolutionary things people were like, wow, this is cool. I love this kickoff. This kickoff's incredible because it's not as much hitting. We still get to keep the kickoff. Or, wow, look at the Sky Judge in the AAF or the XFL 2020. Like, knowing that what is the one main thing NFL fans complain about more and more is about how we can see the official calls better. We know the game better now, to where we can keep up with refs better on TV and slow-mo cameras and kind of angles. But we need that assistance because those guys are in live action. They don't get those slow-mo angles all the time, So, like, you get a Sky Judge in these other leagues that gets to, like a Mike Pereira or like a Dean Blandino that gets to stop and check these items and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, that we at least caught this before it was a bad call. The NFL hasn't done that yet. Now, credit, they're slow on doing these items because you have more teams. There's a lot more money involved in them, and they're the legacy property. So they can kind of stick with their guns and wait on this stuff. But the beauty of it is you have these leagues that can do these items outside of the NFL much more on an experimental level. And they can sit back, relax, and say, you know what, this ain't too bad. And then you see owners proposing it in owners league meetings and, kind of like changes to officiating calls, like for votes. And it keeps on growing like that. And that's the beauty. You get to see those experimental pieces to it as well. And then I think also, like your point, you're talking like the affordability for like games and affordability for fans. The fan atmosphere can also be improved like that too. You can experiment more with like in-game items. You can experiment more with like, how do we grow the game in terms of like, say it's not all about the gate sales anymore, because it's not. TV drives money mostly for sports. So how can we make it more where we're getting people in seats that can more, it's that forgotten audience. So maybe they can't afford an NFL ticket. They can't afford the expensive college football ticket to like a Bama or like an OSU. How do we get that audience that it's like they love football, but they want to be able to do something that it's family friendly and easy to get into. So like you see a lot of experimentation on so many different levels with this stuff that it does help drive the sport and the field around surrounding the sport and in sports culture more so, because you have more than just one commanding voice anymore. You have multiple different smaller voices that can say, hey, we've tried this. Maybe you should check it out, And the more you keep hammering it home, the more it kind of grows, that more the changes grow to make a better game. And it helps NFL fans. That's what I've always not understood about some like NFL or go home types is they'll go, we don't need these leagues. We got one. We have college football. We don't need anything else for recruiting items. It's like, well, hang on now. It's not just always about like, yeah, I'm the same way. I thumbs down to that all the time. It's not always like, yeah, the player angle I think is one big deal. Not every player coming out of college is ready for the NFL. So that argument always, I think, is stale. But the other stale part of it is about just, it's just the players, it's like, no, there's other items too. Like, you're an NFL fan. You should be supporting that these leagues are pushing to help your sport better itself or your league better itself. You shouldn't be knocking it down. You should be in full support of this, to be frank. You get guys from rosters from these leagues that get signed on training camp. What if this is a dude that's your starter? Are you going to knock that league down because your smaller XFL or USFL gave you a starting tackle or something that you were sorely missing? No. What's wrong with you at that point? Like, that's the thing that I hope keeps building. The more time you see these leagues like the XFL, the USFL stick around, the more it becomes accepted, which is why longevity is so important too. Like, you have these great ideas, but you have to be able to stick around and say, you know what, that's stable and they have some cool stuff they keep on building on. So let's keep doing that.
And, as opposed to a guy, let's say, who gets signed to an NFL practice squad, or better from the NAL, the XFL, the USFL, instead of that, without one of these leagues, that guy is an assistant coach at a high school football team. He's not doing that. These leagues have given the opportunity to people to stay in football past the point that a lot of other guys would. Look at this upcoming Tuesday, I'm going to have Tyler Kolka on this show of Lawrence Technical University, who just signed with the Aubix Seagulls over in the X League.
Yes.
In Japan. This is a guy that has been, since he's out of school, constantly touring basically the entire globe, showcasing his quarterbacking talents because there are places that there's a demand for his talent.
You know how much of a rabbit hole you can go into with just international ball? I mean, not even like ELF. Like, I'm glad you brought the X League up because it's another one that it actually is a lot of talented folks in there. Like the Aubix Seagulls. I mean, you talk about the legacy they have. Yeah, I mean, between you got them, you got the Fujitsu Frontiers, and you got the Panasonic Impulse. Like those three are like the legacy teams in the X League that have just been dominant for years. But like that is a lot of talent there too. There's been good Japanese talents that have gotten looks in the international scene, and actually more recently, some CFL global combines that have been doing that. And the global scene has been exploding as well. NFL, of course, they've done a great job, I think, of expanding that game globally. But the ELF's been doing an excellent job, I think, in growing their sport. The X League has been, from my talks and when I used to do talks with people about it, it's not as fast moving because it's more company owned and more club sport and like amateur based, but it still has really good players that they'll sign on and they'll pay these players from the US, like say David Pindell from Connecticut. He gets paid to go out there and play quarterback for a company run team, essentially, or club team is what is a very advanced club team. So yeah, I mean, dude, you almost opened a whole not a can of worms, but like there is a rabbit hole so much international. We can talk clubs below the ELF in Europe that started more of the club scene that is the basis for how the ELF kind of became to its own thing. It's wild. I mean, and again, the IFA, another example. There's the LFA in Mexico. Like that's an excellent league in its own right that has plenty of players recently that have gone down. I believe Terrence Williams was actually one of those players, former Dallas Cowboys receiver that had some really solid years in the NFL that went to an LFA squad recently. So there's a lot more options, and a lot more chances for people to play. I mean, hey, if we're talking in the US, AJ McCarron, I think, is a great example of what you mentioned, where he's made his money in the NFL and now it's all about, hey, I just want to play football. I just want to enjoy it where I can start and show my son that I still have what it takes. And I don't have to say it's more of like a pride thing where it's like, I get to play football and start and show my kids that I have tape. I wasn't just a backfield or a backup junkie where I'm getting checks to be that guy that waits like a Jim Sorgi the rest of his life. I have my money. Now I'm going to go play for fun and maybe street cred, if you want to put it that way. So many angles, though. You keep on bringing this stuff. I'm like going to get lost even more so in like these other leagues.
And I hate to do one more, but I'm also a big MMA guy. That's what this podcast is a lot of from week to week with the UFC. And we always see the MLB and the NFL because they're more traditionally United States centric sports. They're a little behind what basketball or what certain combat sports do. But if you follow those trends, you got to think that they're exploring their options in Asia, and you got to think that everybody's trying to make their way down to Africa because, the NBA and MMA have both been searching for the talent pool that is contained in that continent. And I wonder how long it's going to be before American professional football makes its way, a little bit deeper into the roots of that continent.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't know much about Africa in terms of football clubs and scene.
Either do
I actually want to. I want to look it up now. There's probably someone that can tell me that I know that will give me an insight. But I think anymore, you're looking at, if we're talking like company in terms of like reach and growth. The NBA, that I'll give them credit. That's one thing they've done such a great job is the international growth of the game. I think I've heard this best, funny enough, on Fox Sports 1 with some of the shows, because some of those shows I can't stand, whether it's ESPN or Fox now, but there's been a great talk about, like say Victor Wembanyama, coming out and going, the international scene has exploded and it's bringing stars on a more frequent level than it ever has before. And I think that at some point you're going to see, the MLB has this a little bit more so in the Caribbean countries and all that, and in Japan with the massive baseball scene that's out there too. I think the NFL, that I think is the next great venture of when do we start seeing more international talents break the mold? It's going to be harder because America is really that centric football landscape. It is the defining football landscape. It has the most football resources to it in terms of growing your athletes, in terms of getting them going at an earlier age and specializing in it. But that's not to say you can't see that change. And I think that some point down the line, you are going to see more international athletes at some point maybe cross the veil and become those stars, as long as football keeps growing like it has been over the recent years. I mean, it's not soccer levels. And I think basketball it's made a case to where you can argue it's getting a larger reach than the NFL, and it's definitely made its presence better in the international markets. But that is changing. The NFL is pushing its money into Germany, which has always been, since the World League has started, been a massive football market. You've seen, I think, in terms of other international places, the UK obviously is a big one. They've got other plans, I think, for other international countries in Europe. And as long as they can keep kind of building that up and kind of developing those systems, maybe eventually get a team over there, which is, we keep hearing that talk more and more. Is the London going to get a team at some point? Will Germany someday? Will we see a European branch of the NFL, which will be wild, but would be massive for international players that maybe they love that sport, but they don't live in the US? Well, now you have teams there. So you're going, interesting. What if we have what if we have schools that, the clubs get a little more resources? Because European club scene is more where you see sports like that. You don't see it in high school. You see it in clubs that develop on the side. You choose to go in and buy in. So what if we see more money going to these clubs? And then what if we see like the NFL, maybe in the future they partner up with the ELF, and maybe we see that as like its own separate thing where they play separate times and all that. There'd be some semantics you got to get over, but what if we talk about the ELF as like another avenue where you see a lot of these, like, these German or Spanish players that are going in that are from these international scenes. They aren't the relegated, international pieces that get signed on. They're the local grown people. The more resources for football you can add, the better you can build your talent base, and the better you can eventually get a chance and a shot to see someone make it big on the international scene in the NFL. It's a longer road. That's the only thing. They're finally getting that international stretch. It's in its still earliest stages, but I imagine in 10 years, you can maybe more and more think like, hey, where's the NFL going to go now? And, where the combine and maybe entry positions at, maybe there's a chance. I don't know if that is in 10 years, but you have to assume it's coming sooner rather than later because the NFL wants to be a global brand even more than ever. And that means more talent will want to hit globally than ever before once you get that outreach spread and more ingrained in the communities.
And you see that kind of in the Pacific Islands stretching to Australia. There's a few key positions in football that those countries specifically export.
Yeah.
But, Zach, it warms my heart that somewhere in Austria or the Czech Republic, is it Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic? I think
it's the Czech Republic now. Believe you're right.
Some kid in Austria, Czech is something. Germany, there's a 7-year-old kid sitting there watching his local team trying to think about how he could improve on the air raid offense. That's a beautiful thing. But Zach, we've been talking for well over an hour now. At this point, is there anything further that you'd want to say? Anything you want to shout out? The floor is yours.
Well, I mean, first off, I'll obviously give the shout outs to the shows. USFL Podcast, In Walls Podcast, they're passion projects. That's how I put them. You can find them on social, USFL at USFL Podcast. Inside the Walls is at In Walls Pod on your favorite social platforms. Just to give you a quick spout, obviously In Walls Podcast, we're in season, so we're doing 2 shows a week, usually Monday or Tuesday for the first one, and then Friday for the last one. USFL Podcast for off season, so a little less content, but hey, be ready for next year. We got plenty more we're building up to. Beyond that, I mean, really, I think it's just for those that maybe are listening, if you aren't getting the message, like, kind of, be a little more, be curious, be like, be, I think, a little more open to kind of seeing what this is all about. I think I always am fascinated when we talk about leagues and I see folks that don't want to watch the stuff, but like, say they're a college football fan. I go, man, you guys, college football fans, you really just kind of discard people once they leave their school. Like, to me, like, that's where I like talk to people and I go, man, if you're a college football person, maybe you'd be the perfect guy to check this out, because what about your favorite guy that left your school that didn't get their shot? Like, shouldn't you be curious, you know? And so I say, like, be curious about this stuff and be more open about it. Like, I mean, it's football, you know, I think that's the thing. Like, you know, yes, the Shield controls pretty much the landscape. It is the landscape, the NFL, you know, it is the big dog on campus, but dude, there's so much more. Like, if you really are wanting to see some changes and you are curious about seeing your league grow, like if you want the NFL to change, like, hey, go check out these other football leagues that are doing some cool stuff that may affect the landscape of football as a whole. So I don't know. I love this. I love this game. I think I've honestly gone to appreciate it more because of these spring leagues and the indoor leagues. And if anything, it gets me more passionate about the players' journeys that we don't always see in the NFL. We always see them as pawns to a greater scheme of your team's success. In reality, these are human beings with lives that don't always get the big bucks. And it's more about grinding for a dream and hoping someday you get to have that dream realized and you can say that you are fully and safely sustained that way. So, you know, use it for that part, for that aspect too. Spring football is so much more than just a second league below the NFL. It really is.
Very well said. And folks, if you consider yourself football fans, act like it. Check out the other stuff that's out there in the world. And folks, this is it for another interlude episode of RotoBallers official MMA podcast. Tap that. I was joined today by Zach Keilman of the USFL Podcast and Inside the Walls podcast. Zach, thanks so much for being here today. That was a blast and a very informative conversation. Folks, we've got UFC Vegas 77 coming up this weekend. More interlude episodes coming up. Have yourselves a great rest of the week, and peace.